It's all your money that they're fighting about. So they're really sort of fighting over credit and who should constrain and who shouldn't and all the rest of it. So there was an epic struggle going on, and there is an epic struggle going on between Charles Sousa, Ontario Minister of Finance, and Rob Ford, Mayor of Toronto. And the two of them met this afternoon up at Queen's Park to try and sort out a reduction in provincial funding to the city of $50 million per year, total about $150 million between now and 2018. I don't know where your sympathies lie on this, but I wanted to just give you a bit of background. I did say a moment ago, I find these kinds of fights over sort of who owes who what money, all of which money belongs to you and came out of your pocket, to be the most distasteful of all. And, of course, we've got this catfight featuring in the blue corner Mayor Rob Ford and in the red corner Charles Sousa. And it is incredibly complicated. But let me give you some basic facts, because I think it's important to know those basic facts. For example, out of the total budget of $9 billion that the city of Toronto runs on, close to $2 billion of that comes in the form of various provincial grants. So when we're talking $50 million here out of what is actually $1.84 billion in provincial grants, we're talking about 2% of the total that comes from the province every year. And we're talking about an amount of money, $50 million, and I'm not dismissing it as being nothing, that amounts to 0.5% of the total city budget. So it's one of those things where I think the reason that people get upset about these kinds of things is that there's arguments on both sides. I mean, on the city side, it did receive and rely on correspondence from the province some time ago saying this money would be flowing through until 2018 and there'd be larger amounts of it than they're being told they're going to get now. And secondly, even Dalton McGuinty, when he was around, had made noises to the effect that there was more work to be done on placing less stress on property taxpayers, because the property tax is not deemed by anybody to be the best tax through which to raise money to pay for all of the services the city provides, in part because it doesn't grow with the economy. Property taxes don't. Income taxes, sales taxes do. Now, on the province's side of all this, they presently have a huge deficit, as you well know. And I'm not going to excuse that or make excuses about it, but the bottom line is they have a huge deficit. They had one even before the gas plant fiasco. They see Rob Ford's Toronto running a huge surplus, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a good thing in its own way. They see Rob Ford's Toronto also reducing taxes like the vehicle registration tax, and they hear Rob Ford and the Toronto government, mostly Rob Ford, lecturing them on getting their house in order at Queen's Park. And so it doesn't seem entirely unreasonable that they would say, fine, this money all came from the taxpayers, and we, the provincial government, don't think it makes very much sense to have Queen's Park sending money to Toronto to create a surplus so that then Rob Ford can give that money back in the form of tax reductions. And so I think that they have that argument going on their side, and I think it turned out to be a bit unwise for Mayor Ford to lecture Kathleen Wynne about cleaning up her own financial mess, which he did last week. And by the way, that lecture in and of itself, the substance of it was quite appropriate, because they should focus on cleaning up their mess. But as soon as they start cleaning up their mess at Queen's Park, one of the things they do is to say, okay, Toronto, you're going to have to do with $50 million less. And Toronto says, well, no. We meant clean up your mess, but don't do it in any way that has an impact on us. And that's not fair either. I mean, you know that. I think it is the constant refuge of misleading politicians. They all do it. When less money is available, they make not a peep with regard to reductions in the size of government and government bureaucracies, and instead then they tell us they're going to cut programs for widows and orphans, and in the mayor's case today, he's going to cut hostels. And, I've said this before, and I say it again, and I say it in a way that is, on the one hand, supportive of what the mayor's been trying to do, but on the other hand, encouraging of him to get on with actually reducing the size of the bloated city bureaucracy, because he could save $50 million with his eyes closed if he got at that. And I'm not talking about the frontline police officers and people cleaning the streets and plowing the snow. I'm talking about the management people over there that fill up buildings, plural. Not just the city hall, but the Metro Hall and all the other city halls. And if they got at that, he could save $50 million in the first year. I would say to both of them, settle this, resolve it. The kind of meeting they should have had today is not one where they came out and said on the Mr. Sousa's case it's all fine and Mr. Ford's case it's disgusting. They should have come out saying, you know what, we've talked about this and Mr. Sousa has his problems to resolve and I've urged him to do it. I'm going to support him in doing it, but we're going to do it a little slower than he'd planned or something like that, as opposed to one side calling the other names and the other side kind of playing dumb. There is no question but that Rob Ford, and that was him, of course, speaking outside Queen's Park this afternoon, has done more to rein in finances that were out of control. In fact, he brought in the first budget I ever can recall from any level of government in my 45 years being involved in politics that actually spent less than the year before. Never heard of such a thing. And we should be hearing about it from time to time, at least controlling it to the point where it doesn't go up or even goes down a little bit when times are tough. So Mayor Ford has made an effort in that regard, but somehow it also doesn't ring true to me to hear that you're calling on somebody else, and quite properly so, namely the Liberals at Queen's Park, to clean up their mess. And then the minute they do anything that affects you, you say, well, no, I didn't mean that. You know, that's the problem that all governments have, is that they, start to clean up their messes, and the minute they impact on somebody, all of a sudden those people say, well, don't do it that way. And again, just to put this in perspective, the province of Ontario presently gives to the city of Toronto $1.84 billion in various grants and subsidies. We're talking here about $50 million out of that, and I'm not saying that's a trifling amount of money, but I'm saying it's a very small portion of what the province gives to the municipal government in Toronto. I sort of wonder sometimes, in 2013, when these people are not 2,000 miles apart, they're like about 2 kilometers apart, Queen's Park and City Hall, why they couldn't get together and have a discussion about this and say, well, look, would it help if we sort of phased this down or did this or did that? But you said quite rightly, Mr. Ford, that we should clean up our mess, so we're now going to clean it up, and that's got to affect some of your money. $1.84 billion of grants and subsidies, and some of that's going to be affected.